Have you ever gotten a gift that felt, well, less like a gift and more like a threat? That's the unsettling spot our main character, Pamela, finds herself in. She's a young servant in the 18th century, and her whole story gets told through this series of secret letters. So today, we're going to dive into how a master's so-called kindness can start to feel a lot more like a gilded cage.
So Pamela writes to her parents, "My master has been very kind." On the surface, that sounds pretty good, right? But underneath, there's this growing sense of dread. See, her old mistress, the master's mother, has just died, and his sudden generosity just feels off.
So that's the big question, isn't it? What is the real price of all this kindness? These letters, they become this gripping account of her mounting fear as she starts to suspect that her master's motives are anything but pure. Okay, so this kindness all kicks off with gifts from his late mother's wardrobe. He frames it as a reward for Pamela's loyalty, a nice way for her to remember her old mistress.
But here's the twist. He doesn't just give them to her. He insists she wears them. And just like that, a gift turns into a command. All of a sudden, Pamela's not just a servant anymore. It feels like she's being dressed up for a new role, a role she never, ever asked for. And this is the trap Pamela's in. She's torn between feeling grateful and this gut-wrenching fear. The housekeeper even warns her that her good looks could be her ruin, which just drives home how dangerous this situation is for a young woman whose virtue is, frankly, her only real asset.
And you better believe the gifts don't stop there. Oh no, they just keep coming, each one more extravagant and more unsettling, pulling the web just a little bit tighter around Pamela.
In her next letter, Pamela describes a scene that honestly sounds like it's from a pretty creepy fairy tale. Her master calls her into his dead mother's closet and just starts piling on all this fancy stuff. It's almost suffocating.
I mean, just look at this list. Fine laced clothes, silk shoes, silk stockings. This is not a servant's wardrobe, not even close. What he's really doing here isn't just giving her clothes. He's trying to change her identity. He's dressing her up for a part.
So instead of feeling excited or happy, she's just overwhelmed with confusion and shame. She feels confounded, awkward. She's totally trapped. She can't refuse these gifts without risking his anger, but accepting them feels all kinds of wrong.
Okay, so what about her parents? How are they reacting to all this? Well, let's just say they are not fooled by the fancy gifts for a single second. They see the danger with the clarity that Pamela's just starting to figure out.
Yeah, her dad doesn't write back saying, "That's wonderful news, honey." Not at all. His response is a stark warning. He's basically telling her, "I know my doubts might spoil the fun, but you need to stay on guard. I think I see what he's really up to." Resolve to lose your life rather than your virtue. Wow. Just let that sink in for a moment. With those words, the stakes just skyrocketed from social discomfort to a matter of life and death. Her own father is telling her some things are worth dying for.
And this is so important for understanding what's going on. In the 18th century, a woman's virtue wasn't just a concept, it was everything. It was her honor, her reputation, her entire future, her social standing. If she lost it all. Game over. So, Pamela's deep-seated fears and her father's chilling warnings, well, it turns out they were spot on. The master's whole nice guy facade starts to crumble and his true intentions begin to show. The very first thing he does is make sure Pamela is completely isolated. He has to cut off any and all routes of escape. She had this one lifeline, this one hope of getting out, a chance to go work for the master's sister, which would have been a safe place for her. But nope, he shuts that down immediately. He's not letting her go. He's tightening his grip. All right, so she can't leave. What's next? He goes after her last line of defense, her only real connection to the outside world, those letters she's been writing to her parents. This girl is always scribbling. It sounds like such a casual, offhand comment, doesn't it? But for Pamela, hearing that must have been absolutely terrifying. It's a clear signal. I'm watching you. I know exactly what you're doing.
And then, finally, the mask comes off completely. The pretense of the kind benefactor is just gone. And what's underneath is revealed to be the predator she feared all along.
He has showed himself in his true colors. Pamela's worst nightmares have become her reality.
She's now in this desperate struggle for her very soul against a man who holds all the power.
So now Pamela is completely and utterly alone. She is, for all intents and purposes, a prisoner in the home of her tormentor, with no clear way out and no one who can help her.
So let's just trace the sinister progression, because it's really a playbook. It started with allure, those expensive gifts. That was followed by isolation, denying her chance to leave. Then came the surveillance, monitoring her letters. And finally, the threat is out in the open. You see? This wasn't just a series of random events. It was a meticulously crafted trap from the very beginning. And all of this brings us to the central paradox of the whole story. The novel's title is Pamela, or Virtue Rewarded, but after everything we've just seen, in a world with such a brutal power imbalance, what could a reward for virtue even possibly look like? It's the question that made this book a phenomenon in its time, and frankly, it's one that still really makes you think today.